Quando você ouve um podcast, está procurando entretenimento ou conhecimento, certo? E se você procura por desempenho e qualidade para o seu veículo, qual a sua escolha? Os amortecedores Motorcraft têm tecnologia Ford e oferecem uma condução suave para uma viagem tranquila e segura. Escolha a confiabilidade dos amortecedores Motorcraft, válidos para a linha K, Fiesta, EcoSport e muito mais. Quando terminar seu podcast, é só acessar a loja da Ford no Mercado Livre e experimentar a diferença.
Come meet me at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shoptaw at C70. No Alan Medlock again today. We'll have him back pretty soon. The school season's wrapping up, but we're going old school tonight. It's been about just about 9 years ago that we started this podcast. We called it Best Dans in Baseball because my co-host for tonight, Dan Buffa, was joining me every week at that point in time. Buffa, you know Mr. Dan from Buffa 82 and his Substack writing. Dan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. It's a pretty nice Saturday night, and at this point, at least, the Cardinals are winning, so it's a happy Saturday on all fronts.
Yeah, we haven't seen the Cardinals in a lead in the seventh inning probably since the last time I did a podcast. It's been a rough week. We're hoping this holds because right now this team needs something to go their way. It's been I don't know if we've had a week like this in a while, even as bad as last year was. That was just kind of continual yuck. This has been like a concentrated version of that, I guess.
It feels like last year they were able to hit, and I think that really kind of masked their struggles a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
You had at least had Goldschmidt having probably his last great OPS month was last April, so you had him hitting and Arenado, but to have Nolan Arenado without much power, building that back up, and then Goldschmidt just watching him about an hour ago try to just put all of his body weight into a swing for the second at bat in a row. It's a different guy out there, and I think those two guys, and coupled with the slow starts of Gorman and Walker, it's kind of just it's catapulted all this very rough start. But it's much more of a depressing start than last year. It's just so quick that the Cardinals have told us, like, hey, it's not going to be an easy ride, so strap in for some turbulence.
Yeah, I think last year by this time we're still holding out a little bit of hope, even though April was so terrible that that there's still a chance for this thing to come around. But when you add in last year to what we've seen so far this year, yeah, it's hard. And then, let's before we get into that, let's talk. You mentioned Paul Goldschmidt. I do think we need to spend some time on that. Goldschmidt struck out 4 times tonight. He's 0 for 30. I think 0 for 30, his last 31 at this point in time. And he's not hitting into bad luck. He doesn't, you're right. He doesn't look like the same guy. And both sides said they didn't want to sign an extension in the spring. And I think at least the Cardinals are pretty happy they didn't, because can you imagine if they had locked him up with this kind of season under his belt? Not that he's necessarily done for a career or anything like that, but you're going to feel really anxious if you've signed him to a 3-year deal and he's hitting 184 with, 800 strikeouts at this point in the season.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that it would have made the Matt Carpenter extension years ago look like pale in comparison if they would have locked the guy up, and it makes you just think, well, man, should they really have tried to move him? Last year following the MVP season, I don't know. I think that those are the high stakes trades that I think this front office just doesn't really know how to make anymore. And now they're probably thinking, well, we're not going to re-sign them, and you're probably trying to get scratch together a possible deal. But I feel like the slow starts is just more like how it's about as slow as his front office has really been to try to fix everything and try to fix the starting pitching, and now the hitting's falling apart. And I think the starting pitching's been pretty solid
Hmm.
as far as the parts that he assembled, but it's still one of those things where if a couple of things go sideways, then the teams could really start to look bad, because it's kind of like a flip of last year where the offense up until maybe August 1st was pretty decent, like top
Hmm.
10 decent as far as OPS, but now you have this kind of thing starting out this year, and as we can't really hide it. It's just the struggles of Goldschmidt and Arenado. Really, just Goldschmidt is short circuited this lineup, unless Tommy Edman Daniel is just that important in this lineup.
I mean,
I
I wouldn't want to think that. I think that's
want to think it.
that's an indictment in and of itself. I think to some degree, but hey, I mean, I don't know because again, like you were saying, I hate to get on the front office too much for they kept Goldschmidt and thought he would still hit this year, and they expected to have a pretty good offense. They went out and got pitching that so far has been okay. I mean, the biggest problems in the rotation so far this year, and again, you can argue that this isn't going to hold, and I'm not going to necessarily push back too hard on that. But the problems so far have been like Michaelis and Matz, right? And those were the guys that were already under contract. Gibson's been
Yeah,
great for the most part. I mean, he didn't go six tonight, but he's given them a chance to win every game but that Marlins game. Sonny Gray's been everything you would expect him to be, except for this game that the Brewers got to him this week. But until before that, he was Cy Young candidate if nothing else. And Lance Lynn hasn't. I don't think he's necessarily given everything that the Cardinals thought they would get, but he hasn't just been completely terrible. So, and the bullpen, as we know, has been really, really good. The pieces that he's gotten. So the front office kind of did their job this offseason, and yet here we are in kind of the exact same place we were last year, but with different reasons.
yeah. It's almost like the devil magic is going against the Cardinals in almost every direction, because you look at Kyle Gibson, and this is the first time that he hasn't gone at least 6 or 7 innings. So he's been everything,
Hmm.
the innings machine that you've wanted. And even tonight, where you thought maybe things can go south, he kind of pitches out of it. He almost like bulldogged his way out of the innings. And Lance Lynn, being a bullish Lance Lynn guy, I can tell you that I want more of that 6 to 7 inning Lance Lynn, and not the guy that, well, he might go
Right.
five. So he's
Right.
kind of performed more to a guy that you're going to give that 1 year contract to, while Kyle Gibson has kind of been like really the shinier signing. And of course, Sonny Gray, outside of the one star, has been great. But it just seems like every night that, and here we are again tonight with 3 runs in the bottom of the seventh. So the
Hmm.
Cardinals they seem to hit that certain mark, occasionally going over it, but being a starting pitcher on this squad, you got to think, man, there's like a margin for error is just so small that can this offense survive if I give up a 3 run home run? Can this offense climb over that? So I think that everything's tight on the pitching staff, and from Lance Lynn telling the media last night, everybody needs to relax. And man, if that could just be really translated into a into a mantra for this team, because I really think that there's just one 10 run outburst away. But then again, that doesn't really fix all the problems, because you just still have all these, I like to call them like gaping wounds, and now they're starting to like multiply. And I've always said, even with this roster, it could be good, it could be bad, it could be ugly. They just have to tread water and stay alive, and they're just not doing that.
Yeah, and then again, and then we see things like what we're seeing just now. Andrew Kittredge comes into the game, which Kittredge has been great. Again, we've talked about that as a good move. This is a move that you're going to make right now in the seventh inning. You bring Kittredge in, and he gives up a 3-run home run, and the Cardinals are now losing again. And it's again, the odds of them scoring 6 runs, and hopefully, maybe by the end of this recording, I've been proven wrong. But the odds of them scoring 6 runs seem really out of whack, and they've taken a game that they should have won. They've done everything right, and then it didn't happen. And so it's like, what do you do, right? I mean, you can't. It's like any decision you make, whether it's good or bad, seems to blow up in your face. The hitters aren't going to be able to hit for, and are taking. That's the weird thing, isn't it? That we're seeing a lot of the numbers about how much they take pitches right down the middle, and you would think
Yeah.
that would be. I mean, I don't even know what the rationale is there, right? I mean, you got to be, especially now. I mean, if it's argument that okay, you want to be patient, but when you've struggled this much, when you see a pitch like that, you got to swing at it, right? I mean, just who cares what happens to it? You got to at least try to hit that kind of stuff because it's not going to get any easier.
Yeah, I feel like one of the most crazy, scary stats was when they were saying that the Cardinals were like the last team in the league in performance against fastballs, and it's
Hmm.
either like they're getting overpowered by it or they're not even really bothering with it. You know, they can't do much with it. And I think of the Cardinals teams, even when they couldn't pitch well, they could at least smack the ball around. But you're just seeing like an overall power outage, and and just like a game like tonight you see now the score has been flipped because were stuck on that 3-run
Hmm.
mark that
Yeah.
the Brewers can strike for something big. And I think that Rise Hoskins, man, but that's probably one of their best signings of the offseason. And that's when maybe I kind of thought, man, should the Cardinals be, thinking about possibly looking at their lineup? Are they set? And of course, I kind of dipped my own feet in the water of thinking, well, Gorman's going to keep ascending, and Jordan Walker was really good in the second half, and Willson
Hmm.
Contreras was very, very good in the second half. And I still feel his wincing scream the other night when he got
Yeah.
tagged on the forearm by that thing. My gosh! And so I just think it's like I'll say it again. It's like the devil magic that never really hit the Cardinals hard. They could at least finish with like a respectable record. Now it's kind of back, and even a little bit of luck, like Contreras having an amazing start offensively. Now that's gone, and now you have
Yeah.
to, you have Paez, who I saw hit the ball harder than ever last week, but now you get to see what he's got. And Ivan Herrera, can he really step into it? So they're kind of scraping the offensive barrel. And again, a game like tonight where maybe a couple things go their way, they get a key hit, they're able to stomach a home run by Hoskins, but now they're kind of eaten up by it.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, they were able to get a hit with bases loaded. I guess maybe we shouldn't have asked for anything more, but you're right. I mean, that doesn't build out much, right? A 3-1 lead it's a bloop and a blast, right? That ties it up, and unfortunately, there was a few more on than that when the blast came. Yeah, I don't know. And when you see Contreras go down like he did, it's really hard to see a lot of optimism in this team. I mean, just and I've thought about this. This time last week, it was like I was looking at the standings and like, the Springs have been bad, but they're a game and a half out of third, and or maybe I guess it was just a game at the time, a game out of third. They're a couple of games, 2 or 3 games out of first. You put a little bit of a winning streak together, and you go, and then they haven't won since then. And now, I mean, I don't, and you lose Contreras for what maybe until August. I don't. I mean, is there a way to have any hope about this team? I hate to say that here in May, but it seems really, really difficult to believe that this team is going to be any different at the end of the season than they were last year.
I really can't. I can't really disagree. And just the fact that the Contreras injury kind of makes it feel the way this team's going. That could be like an all year thing as far as him getting back and being able to help save the team. And you got to
Hmm.
think when he gets out of that, when he gets back to actual recovery and actually hitting, then he has to kind of find his way back. And Memphis, he's going to try and jump onto that club and find his way back. But there's not much really also waiting for the Cardinals down in Memphis that could really help them offensively unless somebody makes a really fast like jump. And you look around and there's just a lot of people that aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. You want a little more from Brendan Donovan. You want him to be that spark. I always kind of thought that when he went down last year is when the whole chemistry of the offense kind of went downhill, but he
Hmm.
hasn't really jumped out of the gate either. And again, you kind of look back to Jordan Walker. They really put a lot of chips in the corner of the table on him. And I thought so too. I thought he could just continue to project. But I've always kind of thought with young hitters, they come up and they ambush the hitters and the other teams, but then the other teams and the pitchers make an adjustment. And then that means that now Walker has to make an adjustment. And I think the same thing could be said for Gorman. And so you just need one of these guys, and especially I would always say one of the big guys and one of the supporting characters to really wake up, because you really just lost one of your best hitter, and you can almost feel like it's still 6 to 8 weeks, but again you got to tack on getting back in the mix to the end of that. So you just need one of these guys to come too, and you have Dylan Carlson, Daniel, who just has become like not even a fourth outfielder.
Yeah.
He went from being a guy who had that really good first year to being, man, we just hope he can get a hit. And so I just think it's a lot of their outfield plans have kind of blown up on them, because if the infield guys were struggling this year, well, maybe your outfield guys could be picking you up. And so everything's worked against the Cardinals in their favor when it comes to, okay, that outfield guy's good. That wasn't a good move. And I pointed it out that the team was like willing to go all in on Giancarlo Stanton, but not get a guy like Bryce Harper, when that's a guy who you can lean on right now. If one of the big dogs was kind of down, and they just can't lean on anybody. Everybody they're leaning on is kind of falling over.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you would have thought going into the season you could have done a little bit of that leaning on a Goldschmidt or an Arenado, but it just
Yeah,
hasn't been there. Um, and I don't, and there's really no explanation why. I mean, these guys are, okay, if you want to say Goldschmidt's a bit on the older side, sure, I get that. But,
sure. Yeah,
we look at the numbers from last year, and while the baseball card numbers were down some, the underlying metrics were really in line with what he had in 2022 when he was MVP. So it wasn't like he's, had MVP and he's kind of gradually stopped dropping. I mean, this is a Wile E. Coyote off the edge of the cliff type of thing, right? I mean, he was really going along well, and then all of a sudden looked down, and now is on the bottom of the canyon floor. And I don't think anybody saw that coming. And I don't know. The Cardinals, even if the offense gets going again now, it feels like they've wasted the good starts from Lynn and from Gibson. I mean, I hope that these guys will go well the rest of the way, but there's a real good chance that there's some regression there, right? That they've had some really good starts, and now they may, the league may catch up a little bit. And if that's the case, what do you do? I mean, you're going to have to score 6, 7 runs to win their games, and I don't know that this offense, even on its best day, is going to be able to do that anymore.
no, not at all. And you're right about those guys. I mean, they've kind of. I wouldn't want to call it best case scenario with both of them combined, but they've been pretty close to it. Like to get even a game like last night where Lynn might get tagged, it's only like maybe 3 or 4 runs, and Gibson's been pretty good. He's only been really tagged maybe for in 1 or 2 games, but
Hmm.
Michaelis, especially before this last start, he had a couple good starts, but then
Yeah.
he could be so bad that you could just go, was he really good in those 2 starts? But it just seems like he could be so bad and then so good. And then Steven Matz, I'll just keep saying this is a contract that just it makes Mike Leake contract look it makes it look a little more digestible. You just look at the guy who can't really get through the lineup 2 or even 3 times without throwing a lot of pitches, and so you don't get excited about those guys coming back. And then you look at like you stated a few minutes ago, what happens when those bottom 2 guys, those bottom tier guys, start to fall out? I don't think Matthew Liberatore is in that position to go, well, I can just make a big step up. And so when the hitting gets going, is the pitching going to fall off the wheels? And then you got Oliver Marmol sounding kind of exasperated already, and it's only
Yeah.
like the first 2 weeks of May. And I know that that's happened before. We've heard Tony La Russa just go, "It's only the 3rd week of the season," and almost lose his mind. But I just see kind of a not a resignation in Marmol's face, but listening to his comments after a loss on the radio, he looks at the guy as just out of answers. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't know how much more to shake up the bag of tricks or to put the names in the hat and pull them out in a different way. I mean, he can't make Paul Goldschmidt, center up a fastball. He can't make
Mhm.
Arenado, crush a baseball. But you also think that maybe he can conjure up some wins, but I don't even think he can really kind of steal a few wins if the manager could steal wins.
Yeah. I mean, there's not a significant amount a manager can do in game, right? I mean,
No,
maybe a couple of calls for hits and runs or a few things like that, but even that's kind of iffy. Or good bullpen usage. And tonight he had good bullpen usage, right? He didn't let Kyle Gibson go, bases loaded, nobody out in the sixth. He went to the bullpen. Romero got out of that inning without too much damage. Then he goes to Kittredge. I mean, this is exactly how you would draw it up in that
You
situation, and it
would,
didn't
yeah.
work out. I mean, and Ollie had some of those last year too, where it just seemed like he pulled the right lever, and the results just weren't there. And not that I think everybody on that staff would say that they have some culpability in this, but I don't think that I don't think that the blame that goes toward Ollie Marmol is completely warranted. But somebody, I mean, that's just part of the manager job, right? I mean, you're the guy that gets to be the avatar for the game, not Avatar the movie, Dan. We'll get to that later on. I know how your movie mind works, but I mean, that's the representation of this team. If you're frustrated with the team, you kind of take it out on the manager at times, and there's no doubt that if there's a Cardinal fan out there that isn't frustrated or aggravated with this team, I'd really like to meet them because I want to see what they've been watching for the last 7.5 months of baseball. And that's the kicker, right? I mean, if it was a month and a half, maybe like this time last year, okay, the patience aspect works. But after a whole season plus of mediocre baseball, even though it's a different type of mediocre baseball than last year, and mediocre is probably overselling it, right? I mean, this is the last place team. It's there's just not patience left, and I don't think there necessarily should be. I'm not saying that you have to go out and turn over the front office, but you also got to do something that indicates that you know what's going on, and maybe that's a I don't know. I did, but that's the problem is I don't know what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing where there's a lot of prescriptions that you could write for the team to do, but I
Mhm.
don't think they really have those maneuvers. You have a front office that's kind of in a transition. Mozeliak has already stated that he's kind of thinking about retiring after next year. Then this Chain Bloom. I hope I said his first name right. He's kind of like the guy that's been slotted in along with Randy Flores to maybe think it, but I feel like maybe there's a couple philosophies up there clashing together,
Mhm.
and even they don't know what to do because on a season like this where it's going to go downhill with three more outs and you could be 15-24, and you're going to start digging that hole. I mean that's where the whole treading water thing comes from. You just don't want to get too low, and this team is just catapulting down a hill. It isn't like they can, they'll win a series or two, but then they won't be able to sweep a series. And then,
Mhm.
they can surprise like tonight and hold a lead into the seventh inning in the late innings. But then, Kittredge, like we saw last week, he's going to give up a home run on occasion. I mean, these guys, even though they formed a good bullpen unit, those guys can't be perfect every time. And,
Right. Right.
maybe one time the Cardinals could possibly, put up 5 or 6 or 7 runs, but that just seems like such a big mountain to climb. And pitching wins games, but if you can't score runs consistently, I think that just cripples your pitching.
And when you look at it, I mean, if the Cardinals do lose tonight, like you said, they're three outs away. They'll be 0-6 against the Milwaukee Brewers this year, who are currently leading the division. The Cardinals haven't played the Cubs yet, who are second. They really haven't
Yeah,
played the NL Central much at all. Yeah, in
no,
fact,
not at
I'm not
all,
sure
not
they.
really.
I guess that's it, right? They only played the Brewers. They haven't played the Reds or
The
the
Brewers,
Pirates.
yeah,
I mean,
I don't think
I
they
have a
played the
lot of
Pirates.
yeah. Um, I have a lot of beef with the balanced schedule, and part of that is
Yeah, it
of
is.
not seeing the center. I mean, I know people didn't like to see them 19 times, but I'd sure like to see them, before June. But anyway, I think that you look at that and you say, okay, they're not competitive with the teams that's winning the division. How is that going to turn around? I mean, you at least got to be able to, win a couple of games, hold your own. Even if you lose a series 2-1, you split this series, something like that. But, they've got to, they're going to go 0-6. Got a chance tomorrow then to go 0-7. Who knows how it goes in? Hopefully that isn't the case. But they haven't won on a Sunday yet. So, who knows? And I think that's just a stark reminder that no matter even if they get something going. Like you said, they've dug this hole and they're showing that they're not as good of a team as the Brewers, who are not necessarily a class of the NL. I mean, they're just better than everybody in the Central.
Yeah, I mean, and the Brewers were also a team that they had the Cubs pry away their manager. They lost a
Hmm.
pitcher. I know. I think they lost one of their big pitchers, so they took some
Burns, yeah.
losses. And now you got a 600 winning percentage team, and the Cardinals are now below a 400 winning percentage. So just you got two different teams, and the Brewers are able to take a hit and keep on going, and they're going to contend for the division title. And it just seems like the tables have turned in the Central, and that's going to be overall one of the weaker divisions. And so you used to lean on, well, you can face a division and catch up. The Cardinals can't even catch up in their own division. And now the Pirates have brought up another big prospect who made his debut tonight. So they're not going to be easy to face. And the Reds aren't going to be easy to face. They got young everything over there. And so the
Yep.
Cardinals, what they're seeing right now is a lot of their prospects underperform, guys that they're leaning on. I'll still say to the end of the day that Oscar Tavares, when he passed away, I think that just really messed with Mozeliak and his whole plan. It's not to put all the chips on that one big unfortunate passing, but I feel like we talk about leaning, he leaned really hard into that. And I feel like everything he's made and every decision he's made in the outfield is kind of like double down on its bad endings. I mean, they're not all bad players, as you've seen Tyler O'Neill go off to Boston and have some
Mhm.
success, and guys like Bader and then Steven Biscotti and all these guys who have had levels of success, but that's again where this is hurting this team, where they got nothing to really go, okay, well, the big guys aren't hitting, our pitching's holding the line, but who is going to step up? Like, is it going to be an outfielder? I mean, Alex Burleson's a nice player, but is he going to throw this team on his back? Brendan Donovan is a nice player, but can he throw this team on his back? Tommy Edman, I mean, he looks like the guy still could be going to prom tonight. But so we can't ask that guy to come back and go, hey man, you've been gone for a while, but can you just be a hero for a few weeks? And then you got good old Matt Carpenter smacking a double tonight and giving Cardinals a little bit of a flashback of his abilities. But
Yeah.
I mean, they just need something, and like you said, I don't know where that's going to come from, because either you're going to bring up some Memphis Heat that maybe can give you a little bit of a push, or you're going to start doing some firing. And people think, well, what if the Cardinals do fire Marmol? Who would they go to? I think the obvious answer will be Stubby Clapp, just for the
Yeah.
fact that he has some similar experience managing the minors. Players would listen to him, and maybe you can lean on the fact that, well, they're not listening to Marmol. Maybe they'll listen to him. But again, you also extend that to how's Stubby Clapp going to get Paul Goldschmidt to hit? It's just
Yeah.
you have a guy who is just he doesn't look like the Goldschmidt that we knew from even last year, where he wasn't his greatest self. But my gosh, we're like, we're drooling right now over that guy possibly showing up. So with this team, it's just there's a lot of things going not so good, but they have some bright lights. I mean, they do play very good defense. They do have a good bullpen set up. Their starters are doing their job for the most part, outside of the expected, catastrophes. But the offense, Daniel, it's just I don't. You need somebody just to kind of step up and break out, but this team looks dead.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, I don't know. It's difficult to say they should be all fired up and ready to go when just
Yeah,
nothing's going right. I mean, that's got to weigh on you, right? I get that. And maybe it does. Maybe it takes somehow they, a walk-off homer or a, big strikeout to win a ball game, something. I don't know. Maybe something catches their fire, but it still feels like we saw a couple of those games, right? We saw that game, what, 2 weeks ago, I think, against the Diamondbacks, right? That Goldschmidt tied it up in the
yeah,
seventh, and Gorman walked it off, and then the next night they lost 14-1. So, it's hard to say that momentum's going to happen with, I mean, any team, but especially with this one, because momentum is tomorrow's starting pitcher, and you just, unless Sonny Gray's going, you really don't know what you're going to get. It's difficult to. I mean, I can't imagine this team running off 5 in a row. Can you? Even if the offense was going, I don't know that you could count on them to put together any sort of winning streak over like 3 games. I'd have to look, but I don't think they won more than 3 games in a row last year. And I think that's kind of the same way, because even if the offense is going, this pitching staff isn't one that's just built to dominate. Again, I don't, right now you take the pitching staff and fix the offense, but this team has a lot of flaws, and we kind of knew that going in. We kind of hoped that some things would go better. We didn't. I don't think we just didn't have any idea. Nobody knew that this offense would look like this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody thought that the Goldschmidt, the plunge would just continue. I thought last year was okay, this is what we might have to get used to with Paul Goldschmidt. We might have to get used to a guy who tries to put up an 800 OPS. Oh my gosh, the struggle for us to put up with that.
Mhm.
Now he's having a hard time getting over 600 OPS. So, and another thing to consider is that the schedule, you would normally think like, okay, going into the Angels series, well, the Cardinals can make up some ground. Not really. Yeah, they're a 14-25 team, but bad teams have even given the Cardinals kind of a run for their money. And then you go into against Boston and the Orioles, then the Cubs, and the balanced schedule. Even if with your lack of success against your one central opponent that the Cardinals have faced, it's not going to get any easier. I mean, I think this schedule is just going to kind of continue to pummel St. Louis, and they're just going to need everything to get on track, or at least, again, one of those big guys needs to really go on a run. I think Arenado's swung the bat better, but when you're kind of cheering on like a 730 OPS, it's you know how far it's dropped. And here are the two guys that you have acquired. But you, again, as I've said over the last few years, they did this more for like, let's sell some tickets. Let's pump up, the merchandise sales. I don't think they really did this to legitimately chase down a World Series title. And now all those almost there acquisitions where they pull off a great trade with Colorado and get Arenado. It's the fleece of the last 10 years, but you don't really do anything with it. You don't go out and get like a big pitcher. You choose a Steven Matz over a Marcus Stroman. There's a lot of situations where it's like, well, why did you get this guy over that guy? And you pull off the Goldschmidt acquisition, and then you just kind of you don't finish the job. And now when things are going bad, there's not really a over the hill moment in sight. I mean, you can get is Tink Hence or Gordon Graceffo going to come up and really change things? Probably not. Not right away. And you got that Victor Scott the second energy, but now he's back down there and he's not exactly ripping the cover off the ball. And Walker's, I guess, hitting a little bit better, but he isn't going to come back and really rescue the offense. So again, there's just not an answer or something you can go, well, we just have to get to this point in time. Well, this team, there is no there's no above the water moment ahead.
Yeah, there's a really good chance that nobody, the Cardinals are not going to be favored in any series the rest of the way, right? They were favored against the White Sox, and you saw how that went. And they've got some bad teams to go on, but at best, it's going to be a push, right? And doesn't mean that they're going to lose that. And they're going to win some series that they maybe wouldn't be favored for. I'm not saying they're going to lose out the rest of the way, but just the fact that there's no reason, because you say, oh, the Angels are a bad team. Yeah, but they're a game better than the Cardinals. And I think
Yeah.
it's hard for us to get that mindset, because we still think of the Cardinals, or at least I do. I say we, it's really me that I'm thinking of this. We still think of the Cardinals as the team that that's been there the last 20 years, that really good team. And they're, last year they had a down year, but I think it's, you start to wonder, is it a good team, or is it just a team that I don't know. It feels like there's more talent than we're seeing. There's definitely more talent than we're seeing, but can they put it all together? Can they be that team, like you said, that should have gone for the jugular? Paul Goldschmidt with a base hit in the ninth inning. All right,
I just saw that.
Breaking
Right.
history here.
I just saw he was 0 for 4 the first round. I was like, please, Paul, just don't wear I don't know, what is that sombrero? Just like a really, really golden sombrero.
I think they go with the platinum for that one.
The platinum sombrero.
I think that's what
the
they
Cardinals.
go with.
They got a little life in there, but I kind of go with you. It's really funny to think that a team that spends this much money, and then we get into that part of it where
Mhm.
Cardinals spend money. I mean, it's 175, 178 million dollars on that field right
Right.
now, and they shouldn't be this bad. I mean, when you have two players like that, even if they're going down at the moment, you think about all the money you're spending on this team. If it was $100 million team and they're 15 and 23, 24, okay, all right, we can understand it. But they spend a
Mhm.
lot of money, and I think it's just the way they spend money, and that gets back to the fact of when there is going to be a change in the front office, is there going to be a change in the way that they think, that philosophy? Like are they going to be like, okay, why should we get this guy and what's a good player? Because that's a big deal too. The way this team can
Mhm.
identify great players, possibly good players, because we're seeing that now with a lot of the prospects coming up and either flubbing out or not, or hitting kind of a brick wall, and then they're bigger guys and they're doing poorly. Really puts that that the closer spotlight on the struggles of those homegrown talents. Like even Mason Wynn has kind of cooled off, and that's kind of really kind of Von Herrera had that good strong start, but you just see the way that this team is a very expensive team, yet they are having to struggle right now to possibly not line themselves up for a 4-game sweep tomorrow. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
where the Cardinals are at. And I'm with you. They shouldn't be like this. I mean, again, an expensive team. And I think about what Bill DeWitt the third said on the radio. Well, don't
Mhm.
show up and spend less money. He's like, well, maybe if you spent less money, would you spend it better, or would you spend it more wisely? It's like I'm ready for something crazy, Daniel. Is kind of what I'm saying. I'm almost ready that if things can't really improve, and let's just say over the next, because I always kind of said let's get to the end of May, and I think that's when they make a lot of changes, but it could come sooner than that.
Yeah.
I mean, their record, they're 15 worse than 500. I mean, you almost got to think, I'll ask you this question, when do you think it's time to push that button? Like, is there a date you have in mind? Is there a record you have in mind? Is it when Marmol just starts, eating chocolate at the press conference and just goes, I'm not answering your questions. I'm just going to eat this ice cream. What's your point of where you think the Cardinals will start to really like shake some trees?
Boy, I gotta think that if if by June 1st they're
Yeah,
not at least within striking distance of, I'd say third. I mean, they're not going to be a 500 team by June 1st. I don't think it's mathematically possible by this point. Um, but if they can if they can put together a 4 or 5 game winning streak, win 6 of 10, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it'd be huge for this team, right?
no, yeah,
Then maybe they show a little life. Maybe you don't worry about it. But if this doesn't turn around, um, if they kind of limp into the end of May, then I do think we're going to start seeing. I mean, they're going to start the calls about shopping because they do have a lot of guys on 1 year contracts, right? We talked about this at the beginning of
yeah.
the year that you got the Lynn and the Gibson with a 1 year option. You've got the guys like Kittredge and Middleton who has yet to
You
pitch
know,
yet for the
Ryan
Cardinals.
Helsley's kind of a big, juicy, probably steak to a lot of teams.
And that would be an interesting one, right? I mean, what good's a closer on a team that doesn't ever win, right? And
That's the one stat they're really good at this year is saves. When he gets in
yeah,
there, it's like I'm finishing it, but
well,
do I
like I
ever
said,
get it?
I don't think there's been a game yet that they have not won a game without him being in the game, right? I mean, he hasn't
Yeah,
necessarily gotten the save or the win, but he has been a part of every Cardinal win this year, and that's not good out of your closer. I mean, your closer is going to have a high rate of that, right? Just because that's what they do. They come in close games, but there should be games where you win 7-2, and you don't necessarily need to bring your closer into a game like that. And they haven't had that. I mean, I'd have to go back and look, but I bet the
yeah,
Cardinals
yeah.
haven't.
I was just thinking myself, like they've lost 7 in a row now. I think Arenado lined out, and so he lost 7 in a row. And I think that the team was one of their best stats was they had 12 saves, and so you got to
Mhm.
think he's had 12 of the 15 saves and the 12 of the 15 wins. But it just seems like it's been so long since you've seen that Kittredge or Romero Kittredge kind of Helsley kind of combination, and that just tells you that when you can't build a lead, when you can't just give your team a lead consistently, your bullpen guys now kind of become like available. Like you wouldn't think about trading a Ryan Helsley, but you could possibly put him into a deal and get something. I mean, you look at a guy like Kyle Gibson who put together all intents and purposes, maybe a rougher start tonight. But I mean, really, for he kept the team in the game on one of his worst nights, and still 5 innings pitched. So he's a guy that you can dangle out there. But you go from the Cardinals going, we're going to acquire a bunch of pitching, and then they go into the season and they can't hit, and you just see how fast things can just go off the rails and go downhill to where there's rumors that Marmol's got a few weeks left, and then you have rumors of you know what does this team need to do to show a little bit of a pulse. I mean, I'll make another different sport kind of comparison. The Blues were bad, and they let go of Craig Berube on December 12th, and then under Drew Bannister, they were like 30-19. They finished with 92 points. They were respectable, but I don't think like it was with the Blues where you had a young star in Jordan Kyrou who wasn't performing, and then the change happened and he did perform. I mean, you want to think that maybe the coaching staff is at a kind of a brick wall with being able to help young hitters, because how do they keep having to try to help these hitters? They send them down to the minors. When Gorman or Walker hits a brick wall, what is their first remedy? So you think, if there is going to be a remedy, we keep going back to this, it has to be one of those guys. It has to be one of the secondary guys, because I don't know what you can do with Goldschmidt at this point. I mean, especially if we're cheering on singles, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
that's true.
just
And I
such a
just pulled.
different time. It's just you can't really forecast a way out, like you said, because there's just so many leaks. There's just so many things that are happening, and you are going to have to make those tough decisions. And really, you think that the one thing I've always kind of thought about the Mike Schilt exit is that he didn't like maybe the way that they were kind of wanting to assemble the major league coaching roster. Like he thought, hey, wait a minute, what happens to this guy? You need this kind of experience, or perhaps it was them not wanting to go out and get certain players. But you just want to know what was the thing that I know Carpenter was kind of furloughed, and at a time Edmonds was too, and then you had a little bit of an exodus with certain players, and then what was the conversation that, because I feel like that's where the franchise went in a different direction. I'm not saying Mike Schill could possibly have this team in a different mindset, but it just feels like he was the one who said, "Wait a minute, this sounds stupid." I want to know. I would love to know what that conversation was and how that tilt kind of went. Because it seems like since then, the first small ball season was great, but then again, the playoffs, they can't do much, and then the wheels come off. And I think they have, since the end of the 2022 season, I don't think any Cardinal fan wants to look at their record, but I just want to know what the philosophy is of this front office and how they're going to turn it around. Like, what are you guys going to assemble a MLB coaching roster that's better than this one? And that's no offense. That's no big smack at Dusty Blake and Turner Ward. I mean, they're doing what they can, but maybe this whole team's idea of success needs to be rewired.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it does. To me, it feels like I'm not saying that Marmol's not going to get fired, because I think he.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a chance that he will, but I think it's also going to be as a sacrificial aspect, because
yeah,
I
kind
don't
of like
think
yeah,
he's. Yeah, I don't really don't think he's the problem for the most part. I think that he hasn't lost the clubhouse from all that we can tell. Now, granted, you never know, right? We're not there, but we have not heard any stories. We've not had any issues, and every time we hear players talk about it, they were like they were saying last year, very disappointed, not only for their own sake, but for for what the manager was having to go through. It seems like he still connects with the players, which is a big thing out of managing these days, right? I mean, that's really what they need him to do, is be that people person, more than the mastermind like Tony La Russa was. The game's a little bit different, but I do think that there comes a point where it's like, look, if you can't let this team just ride, right? I mean, this is a franchise that has said there are standards, there are levels. We expect to win. You got to play right and all that stuff. And I think even if it's like, hey, Ollie, sorry, I know you're not really the problem, but we have to, you can't fire 25 players, so you try to fire the manager. That's the old saying, and I think there's something to that. It maybe I don't think that's the first thing. I think that we go back to that coaching shuffle that I think it was in 2017
Yeah.
that Matheny's staff had. It was probably like I think it was like a couple days before Blogger Day that year, and we had a lot of questions for Mo that one. We're gonna have a lot of questions for Mo this year too, but that idea that you've got to just do something to show that things have got to change. Because I think that even if you're not sure what to do, and I know this organization and really hates to just kind of fly off the handle and go. They want to be deliberate. They want to be conservative. They want to, you know, err on the side of caution. And I think that's all great stuff. But I also think that when you're 15 and 25 or whatever they are now, and can't beat the Brewers and are struggling for the second straight year, you can't just say everything's going to stay the same. You have to do something, and if even if I think it's just got to be a coaching change just to see if some new voices can get in there and make make an impact where maybe Turner Ward couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be some kind of jump start because you can't tell your fan base, ha ha, you think if not showing up is going to be a good thing, then you continue to run out this product. You can't be okay with complacency and again spend that much money and have those kind of words like we're not just going to be a winning ball club, we expect more. Well, I would tell Bill to what now you're kind of a losing ball club. You're kind of one of those teams where I think people now will look at you and go, and you go back to that one poll from the Athletic where all those executives were polled about the teams and their front offices, and the Cardinals didn't receive a vote. And I just think that's like the whole reputation and respect level for the Cardinals front office has been kind of turned into a joke. And so you have to tell the rest of the league that that's not the way it's going to be. You have to make some kind of change, or else guys like Mozeliak and people that under him that think under him, they have to start seeing their way out. Or I don't think anything's going to change. I think the way that they evaluate and acquire and you could say build baseball players is very, very flawed. And I think that they put a lot of stock because if you go back to the offseason, and there were a lot of people that were kind of saying, hey, the pitching is you guys are doing that, but what about the hitting? What in case this happens and this happens? And they were, well, we got Jordan Walker and Gorman, and Donovan's going to be back, and you lean on guys that are not as proven as the Cardinals think they are. And it makes you think of that thing where the Cardinals loving on these guys a little more than even the national media would love on these guys. And they just put a lot of stock in prospects that are ultimately don't take off as fast as they would like. And that's just the way they're thinking right now. It's obviously around the league. It's not the way that the league used to respect them. And I think that, well, if you're going to stock the major league roster, I hope they go with something different. Like you went with the young coach approach. Why don't you bring in like the older coach? Like if for a wild card like this, what if Bart McGuire wanted to manage? And he's put his time in at the major league level, and he's an older voice, but he's also connects with hitters really well. So you would have to think like that instead of going, well, we're going to have Ali Marmol. He doesn't have any manager experience, just like the previous two guys we hired. And then you have Turner Ward and Dusty Blake, and you have like these seemingly guys that nobody really knows about, and they're not really doing a great job. And so you can't do all that in the middle of the season, but I think that not like the blow it up is going to happen. That might happen after the season, but you really got to start thinking, designing who can you unload, what can you get in return, and how are we going to get back to being that team? Or you be like the Blues and tell your fans that, hey, we're not going to make a lot of flashy moves. We're rebuilding, You have to choose one or the other, but their message to the fan base has just been so muddled over the past few years, and that's a problem.
Yeah, you've referenced, and I got a chance to listen this afternoon to the conversation with Martin Kilcoyne and Bill DeWitt, the
Yeah,
third. And I don't. I know there was some. I think somebody took that clip of talking about the fans not showing up, and that's just going to relate to a worse product and kind of a spiral. And I think there's some truth to that, right? I think, like you
sure.
said, the Cardinals have spent. I don't ever think that this organization is one that is out to maximize the bottom line. I mean, yeah, obviously they make money. There's no doubt about that. But I do think they spend for more than this market would normally hold because of the fans that have come through. I think the attendance makes a big difference, and to some degree, that's why I thought they would do a little bit different approach this winter, right? And get a Sonny Gray, but also get you know an Aaron Nola, and get a
Yeah,
couple of really good, get people excited about coming, and they didn't necessarily do that. But I don't know. I don't fault him for that, and I think that's front office. I think this ownership group wants to win. Sometimes I think they want to win on their terms, but I do think they have an approach to win it. I don't think we're going to see the same thing next year. I think that it was easy enough for them to say, okay, 2023, that was an off year. We're going to do
yeah,
this. We're going to go fix the pitching. But when everything goes south again, I don't. I mean, I'm not going to rule out Mo stepping. He's not going to retire. He's not going to leave the organization. But I can see him stepping out of that president of baseball
yeah,
operations and even before the end of the year, right? Or say, hey, we're letting Heim Bloom be the guy in charge of the draft, or he's going to be the one kind of calling the shots for the rest of the year, or something
yeah.
like that. I think there could be some sort of front office shakeup um, around any time now, but definitely by June or July. If this team's not doing it, I think they're going to have to do something. That seems like an easy thing to do. As Mo says, look, I'm going to go step off and do this big picture thinking that I thought I was going to get a chance to do when I was president of baseball operations, and I'm going to kind of run out my contract there, and we'll have somebody else, be the face at least of the baseball side of things.
I feel like if I had to really ask them, I want to know. Okay, so you rebuilt the pitching staff, but you didn't want to give, and this is where I would say, if you really wanted to say, okay, we're not gonna the 2000 because DeWitt the third did say that in another interview I think months ago. Well, 2023 was like a blip, and we're
Right.
afforded one of those years, and then go out and get a Montgomery when he's sitting on the market, and he's probably willing
Right.
to take, hey. 1 year, 25. I'll get that big multi-year deal. I had Scott Boras as an agent who messed everything up. You know,
Hmm.
but you have a guy out there. It just goes. You get that guy, and I'm not saying hey, he's going to help you hit, but maybe everything could be different, and you could at least say that hey, we did everything we could. The offense spiraled, and that was kind of a thing. But it just goes back to those deals they don't make. Like they want to give the money to David Price, but not to Max Scherzer. They want to give the
Hmm.
money to Stanton, but not to Harper. The where they allocate those like Matt's type contracts and the Fowler type contracts is very peculiar. Because I also believe that I think they want to win. I think DeWitt Jr. would like one more kind of deep playoff run to hang his hat on because I do think down the line somewhere he is going to sell the team, and that's going to be kind of like that's going to be different baseball after that. That's kind of like a scary, but also, oh, well, what's over that hill? Like, what does that look like? And I think we're still ways off from that. But when you don't go out and make that one little move, like the Montgomery move, and maybe you go, okay, we pick up a hitter. It's just the complacency. And it's not really like DeWitt Third said anything wrong in that interview. It's just the way he's like, ha 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 ha. Well, if you don't show up, we won't spend. I almost want to say, well, Bill, then spend less and let's see
Yeah.
if you spend wiser because I mean, you they're just so much on the cusp of making a deal over the last 5 to 10 years, and they don't do that, and they do another deal that I'm really interested in, and I'm kind of with you. I think that when they do make moves, I think they have to shake the tree that high, They can't just do like Major League Baseball coaching changes. That will help, but who's making the decisions up top? And if you brought in Bloom to be that guy, maybe you have a couple different philosophies like clashing up there. And if you make it one philosophy, you're at least headed in the right direction. But also be candid with your fan base. I mean, if you say, hey, we're gonna, they could say, we're gonna change the way we think. We got Bloom coming in, and it may be a little bit rocky, but stay the course with us. Then I think fans would buy in. I just think the fact that their message is always a little different. Like, we want to win. Good record is not good enough, and now we're afforded a blip, and now fans don't want to show up. It's just like everything coming out of this organization is kind of starting to sound weird and kind of like defensive.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there is probably a little bit of that defensiveness. If nothing else, you just don't.
It's new ground
Some,
too for this ownership group. It's kind of like I don't think they've really. I know they had that 2007 season, but I don't think they've really experienced this kind of reaction in their whole time in St. Louis either.
no, no. I mean, there's been times where Cardinal fans have gotten up, kind of persnickety, because the season has started off well, and then but the second
Yeah.
half picked up. I remember when they were flying banners to fire Tony La Russa in spring training. I mean, there things like that, back before Tony had won a championship here. Um, there's always going to be some of that. And I think you're right in a degree that there would be some fans that would understand, okay, we've got to retrench, we've got to rebuild, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. But I think there's a lot of fans that wouldn't. But I also think that this organization, and Bill DeWitt the third said that so much in that interview, they don't want to be the Cubs or the Astros who just strip it down to bare bones and lose 100
Yeah.
games for 3 years so they can get the draft picks. They want to be competitive every year, and honestly, right now, you wonder, right? I mean, we have to see how Chase Davis turned out, and we know that the 2020 draft went very well with Jordan Walker and Mason Wynn and Alec Burleson and Tink Hens. All that went well. But, do you necessarily trust the organization to get a high pick and then develop them in the way that they should be? And I think there's differences of opinions on that. And I think there's legitimate differences of opinion in that. It's good to have a high talent guy come in, but you also have to make sure that they take that high talent and develop it. And I don't know if that's where the Cardinals are at right now, because the Cardinals, especially on the pitching side, don't have much, right? Not much that they've
No, I mean,
developed on their own. And even on the hitting side, we're kind of seeing a little bit of,
brick
maybe
wall.
they've hit a brick wall that they've developed to the point where they can't adjust what the league's giving them. Maybe that's the case. Maybe it's just a terrible run by everybody, and some hitting coach is going to come in here and say 3 words, and all of a sudden everybody's going to hit fastballs forever. But yeah, you do wonder if even getting a high draft pick is going to be able to help this. And I don't know really. Again, I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if it's, hey, let's, front office, you're going to have to be willing to pay that first level of payroll tax, of the competitive balance tax. Is it to go ahead and get a Montgomery in a situation like
Or
that,
even like
or to
a
go
Luis Robert, where you go, hey,
right?
we're going to go ahead and give that guy $5 million and see what's under the hood.
Yeah,
And I'm with you. I think that it is a problem with this team. If you hand them a great toy, are they going to sabotage it? Like, look at Jordan Hicks. He goes to the Giants and they go, hey, why don't you stop going over the top with the ball? And now he's a competent starter. You think, well, if the Cardinals could have identified that problem, maybe he'd be in Matz's slot and the Cardinals wouldn't have a Matz to worry about, or it'd be a little bit different. And you just think, you know, I think Randy Flores and what the scouting department is doing is great. I've been a guy that would like to see Randy Flores be kind of champion for one of those roles up there, and be given a chance to really think with a broader scope for the team, because I do think they've drafted well and they've got some competent players, but there's been players where it's like you hand off you drop the kid off at daycare and you go, okay, now take care of my kid while I'm gone. And I feel like this team has not taken care of some players, or maybe they've overhyped some talents, and that's the kind of thinking that needs to be rearranged even before the rebuild starts. I think you have to go down the soup to nuts with this team where it comes to how are you evaluating players? Why do you think this guy's good over the other guy? Because that's where this problem is originating from. I mean, they're going out and making these big, high profile acquisitions without really finishing it on the pitching and just really rounding out a roster. But they're also leaning on certain players that maybe aren't as great as they thought. And so I think their decision making and their thought process needs a lot of work too.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a ton of things
There's
that
a ton of things. This is a
that's really
laundry
it,
list.
right? I mean, because we've talked and talk about this stuff, but it's like there are some years, especially when things are going like okay, but there's been talk like okay, they have to go out and get a starter at the trade deadline, and if they
Yeah,
do that, everything's wonderful. This is you don't even know where to start, right? And there's not a they need to do this, and if they do this, everything's great, or if they do that, everything's fine, or if they stop using this guy, or if they use this guy more. There's none of that. There's just nothing
yeah.
that is really working unless you
There's
can pitch
no
Sonny Gray
direction.
every game.
Like there's no
Yeah.
and I'll make another Blues comparison. They recognize it. They started trading those guys. They traded Vladimir
Hmm.
Tarasenko. They traded Ryan O'Reilly. They got prospects. They came out and acknowledged that hey, we're rebuilding, we're retooling, we're as Tom Stillman he said, we're re-somethinging. I mean, at least you just. I mean, I feel like they have to do that this season. They don't want to trade those guys. Well, now you have to trade a Goldschmidt or an Arenado. Get something for him, especially Goldschmidt, because I think the team is going to be looking into an extension with them. I mean, unless he just dramatically turns it around. So they're going to have to think about the on-field product too. They're going to have to think about what they can move, and then think, okay, who's going to lead this retool? I think a rebuild. That's going to be the biggest question, and that's where the front office shakeup comes into play. Who's going to be the mastermind? Because we've known for the past since Walt Jocketty left that it's been John Mozeliak. Michael Gersh is in the GM spot, and Bloom is now kind of an assistant, or he's in there and he's in the brain trust. But who's really leading this rebuild? Because we knew back in the day it was Walt Jocketty. He was the guy that he picked out a pitching coach and a manager in a way that he knew how to build a team with these two guys. And I don't think the Cardinals have that anymore. I feel like they don't have a good connection between the dugout and the front office. And so you have to rebuild all of that too. And it just depends on when they want to start. I mean, if the team keeps going down May 28th and they're 15 worse than that than 500, then you got to start
Hmm.
making those moves. You got to start asking teams, hey, if we made these guys available, and then you Bill DeWitt the Junior needs to be able to step up and say, well, I'm not going to stand for this. And there's no complacency in this office. I'm going to do this and this and this. But he has to be able to do that. And I
Yeah.
wonder about the urgency they have. I want to know what the urgency level is now that maybe it's not a blip on the radar.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk about you're right. Goldschmidt's a free agent, but who's going to trade for him? I mean, nobody is right
Yeah,
now,
I
right?
mean,
I mean, you're
what
not.
can you get for him? So it's like,
No.
do you hold on to him and have to go, all right, Arenado, you're going to waive it for who? And then who's going to take on that? I think John Heyman said, and it was the funniest paragraph, because he said, well, if you go anywhere, maybe it'd be the Dodgers. They don't really have a need for him, but
Yeah.
that's the thing. The Cardinals, did they wait too long again to possibly unload one of these guys? And that would have been, ballsy to do that. That would have been risky last year to go,
Yeah.
you know what? Things are
Mhm.
going off the rails. We're going to get rid of Goldschmidt while he still has some value. And now, a year later, man, his value is taking a shot. You'd have to like pair him up with a Helsley or something really juicy to get a
Mhm.
team to take him. But then what's that other team going to do? And something that kind of was scary that was said on the radio, I think Brandon Kiley said, I would put chips on the fact that he might go somewhere and turn it around. And doesn't that just make you feel like really, really bad as a Cardinal fan to think that these players could just go somewhere else and just flip the switch? Not that that would happen with Goldie, but
Mhm.
when I heard that in the radio, I thought, I'd love to just say you're wrong, but I don't think I can, Daniel. I don't think I
I
can.
think I think I would on Goldie just because Goldie's had. I mean, one, Goldie's had a very successful career. And he's had really
Yeah,
good success in St. Louis. It's not like some of these young guys. You can argue that they didn't get a fair shake in St. Louis,
yeah,
or they got different coaching. Randy Arozarena, I think, and I've said this a couple of times, and I know Kyle mentioned it a lot back then. Randy Arozarena was like one of the few people that benefited from COVID because he didn't have to play ball. He worked out and became a different player than he was with St. Louis. I mean,
yeah.
I
He
don't,
was the
that doesn't happen necessarily. Tyler O'Neill, we've talked about Tyler O'Neill. He's got to stay on the field to be held and
got
be
to stay
good.
on the
And that's kind of
field.
what, that's, when he was playing for Boston, he's playing well, but that he's already hit the injured list. Um, I get, I get why people get frustrated with these players go and do something else, but at the time they weren't doing anything in St. Louis, and you sometimes you look back and hindsight's 2020. I think to some degree, but I think with Goldschmidt, he should know himself well enough, right, at this point in time, that unless there is just some sort of mechanical issue that we're not seeing and the coaching staff's not seeing, and that somebody on Atlanta or something or wherever he might get traded does see, I wouldn't expect for him to click like that. And honestly, right now, if you're trading him to a contender, they're probably putting him on their bench, right? And hoping that they can figure something out, hoping they get some limited time for him. But, is it worth trading a Goldschmidt for some single A lottery ticket? I don't think so. I think you might as well just let him play out the string if this season isn't going anywhere,
Yeah,
and, you know, part ways at least amicably at the end of the year and say, we gave it a best shot. Because there's if Paul Goldschmidt doesn't change significantly between now and the end of the year, it's very easy to say that this is Paul Goldschmidt's last season, right?
yeah. I mean, you have to think that, and I just keep thinking: is there another coach on their team that could possibly unlock something? Like you see that Wainwright, when he was we thought he was going down, and then he kind of made an adjustment on the
Mm-hmm.
pitching side, and I mean, he was a king of adjustments, Wainwright. But it looks like Goldschmidt. The worst thing is he just looks like his confidence level is zip. I mean,
Yeah.
he came to the plate tonight, and I think he had a couple runners on, and you're thinking, man, and the reason, one of the remedies I thought was they just drop him down to sixth and let him pick up some RBIs, but I don't think there's any RBIs to pick up down there. I mean, I think you can move him around the lineup. I don't think keeping him up in that third spot is the best thing to do. That's why I think if you drop him to six, he's still in there, but he's not having as much pressure because I don't think he has an answer for what's going on with him. I think he's having fastballs go by him, and these are ones right down the middle that you would think
Mm-hmm.
he would crush. And so, I mean, you want to think that maybe he'd go somewhere else and figure it out. But I also think in the end, you're going to have to look to the other way and look to Arenado, who's shown that he can still maybe have some fight. And I can see a guy like, this is the sad thing. I think in the more Arenado, I can see him going somewhere and getting reignited and just going nuts. And so those are the realities the team's going to have to face. I think possibly riding out the rest of this year with Goldschmidt if they can't be. Because I'm with you. I don't want to get an A ball player for Goldschmidt. I'd rather just go, okay, we're going to ride out the rest of the year, figure it out, and maybe trade some other assets because, is it worth just to ship them out to get somebody unless you can get like something pretty good? Like, what if a team goes, we spotted something and we're gonna give you a pitcher, but I don't think that's the case. I think the Cardinals are gonna have to look into trading a lot of their big players, and even maybe one or two of their young players. But yeah, I don't know. The Goldschmidt thing, Daniel, is probably the most peculiar and sudden drop off
Mm-hmm.
that I can think of with a big player in quite a long time. I mean, Holiday, it was always like he get hit on the hand or he get injured. He didn't just drop off the face of the earth.
Right.
And then, you have a guy, Pujols, he slowly had those leg injuries and he slowly became more, or should I say, less an alien at the plate, over his last few years in St. Louis. But I mean, you look at the last like year with Goldschmidt and his OPS dropping each month, but gosh, it just didn't drop to like this ridiculous level.
Yeah.
And now we're 11 days into May, and then that's the thing about the baseball season. They play every day, just about, and it feels like the calendar can just start to really flip. Like, okay, it was April 15th or so, and they were kind of off to a bad start, but now it's you're cruising to the middle of May, and June's going to be here, and then July, and I just feel like I know this team needs to make a lot of different big decisions. I just don't know if I have the biggest amount of confidence in it that they're going to know what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, the season's 25% over
Yeah, 28
already.
already.
Yeah. And which is, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, when you're right, you play this every day and then you look
You're
up
just
and all of a
leaving
sudden,
spring training, and now, eh.
yeah. But I mean, if it's beyond the idea of small sample size, at least in the regard to the season, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is without something changing. This is what this team is, and this is what Goldschmidt is, and everything of that nature. And it's not good. And I don't. Again, I know that there's going to be a push to trade Arenado. I get that. I did like the tweet I saw this week where it was like we thought that you know the Cardinals were getting Nolan Arenado, making him a Cardinal. It turned out that he was making the team the Rockies. And maybe Nolan brought a little too much of Colorado with him. I don't know,
Yeah, you
but
brought a little too much of the mile high
yeah,
sadness.
yeah. But and that was the thing, right? We really wanted. I mean, Cardinal fans,
You're
I think, embrace
static.
both of these guys. Yeah, and then we wanted to see a deep playoff run with those two guys, right? And it just hasn't happened. Doesn't look like it's going
Yeah,
to now because again, the idea of Paul Goldschmidt on this team next year, unless something happens and that something clicks and he has a good rest of the season, and then they may talk about signing him, but it seems unlikely right at this moment. And so that idea of them going deep into the playoffs, it's not there, and that's a sad thing to see because you always thought they were going to get that, right? That they were going to get a chance to play for
yeah,
the
they're
World
going to help them
Series or
ascend.
yeah, and it just Goldschmidt got a chance to got past the NLC, got to the NLCS against the Nationals,
Yeah,
but we know what happened there. And Arenado hasn't even really had that, and in COVID and things and different, all that stuff kind of plays into it some, but it's just it's hard when you see an era that didn't develop the way you thought it would.
no, and you think that when you got Arenado, I mean, I think it was a stack. The Cardinals got one of those guys, and then they got both of
Mm-hmm.
them, and you're thinking, "Oh, right, here we go." Since the 2014-15, really that last time the Cardinals were really like a pennant chasing team. Well, here we go, and they just kind of seem to go backwards, and it makes you think about where they were in that 2022 playoffs, where you had Pujols coming off the 700 home run season and you had these two big guys, and maybe you could hold court, but then you were just it was the decisions they made in that series, and then
Mm-hmm.
their play since. It's like the drop off has been so quick because you could say at that moment that Cardinals were a 90+ win team, and they had another first year manager who had a 90 win season, and then everything just kind of went bad. I mean, even when you look at last year, you had some hope because of the way that Walker hit the second half. Contreras really righted the ship in his first year with the Cardinals, and he was cranking this season. And then you see how his injury has just really thrown everything into the axe grinder. It's just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of optimism about this team, and there should be, man. I mean, with that roster, you look at them, and again, we talked
Right.
about it. They should be better than this, and they're not, and they're just like descending further down to where, as much as I could say that if trading Arenado would be great, you'd have to really get something to make that kind of a trade. And is it going to help this team in the future? Is it going to help them like in the next 5 years? So you lose Goldschmidt at the end of the year, and then you lose Arenado. You have to have a direction that you can give fans, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to make a trade like that and do it competently. And as much as I think they could do it, I don't really again trust them to make a competent trade like that and get the proper amount of value.
Yeah. Well, and they're definitely not in the position, that some of the times they've been in the past, where they've got a
No.
team that can have the assets to go get, or a success rate that they could do.
I
So,
mean, think about it
I,
this way, man. Think about it to go from these two guys finishing in the top five MVP in 22 to being almost non existent in those two
yeah,
categories, at least thus far. Not like, okay, we're 4 years later. It's just like less than 2 years later. And they're just, that's
right.
how quickly. And it's like their dissension has taken a team right with them. And then gets like all the like, okay, these two guys, you pull them out of the picture. What does this team look like? Well, when those two guys aren't hitting, and they only have one Sonny Gray, and even he can be dented up by the Brewers. You don't really have much, and that's the thing. And again, you go back to the front office. Is there a couple different brains working up there? Is it going to be one brain in the recovery? So I don't know, man. I'm kind of with you in the fact that you look at all the problems this team, and I get overwhelmed. I mean, thinking, okay, you work on this area, but then maybe the other area just sparks up, becomes a problem. You work on that area. I mean, what's the long term? When is this team going to really climb back into it? Because another way to look at this is that the Cardinals are being passed by other teams, like analytically and the way they make moves. And do the Cardinals have enough time? And what does that look like to get back in that big ring of contenders?
Yeah, I don't know, and I'm sure we're not going to figure it out tonight.
We're going to find out
Uh,
slowly but surely.
yeah, probably so. Let's go ahead and we'll end on a little different notes. Dan, talk a little bit about what you're doing over at your Substack, and what people can do to read you there.
Well, I mean, it's kind of just become the whole playground of what I write about, movies and TV and baseball, and it's a lot of fun. And I can credit you, man, with really pointing me in that direction. And I saw that, man, Shoptaw is writing for Substack. I got to check that out. And I like the way that they kind of promote work. I like the way that there's a Substack network that you can get follows from inside the network of writers, and it's a lot of fun. I mean, there's the Cardinal content. I feel like there's a lot more. I'm just having fun again. Because as you know, man, blogging is the most fun. It's just getting to be able to go on a website and just spend some opinions and maybe kind of move the needle in some conversations. But yeah, it's a daily dose of Buffa at Substack.com, and it's I think I had it as Ramble on Buffa, and I was like, what kind of idiotic name is that? Really, it's really Buffa's Buffet because I discuss so many different things. So having a lot of fun over there. Big credit to you for pointing me in that direction.
I know you've got some behind the paywall. Some is free though, still, right?
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the times I just want to make it all free because there's that struggle you have as well. Should I get a
Yeah,
little something for it? But I also want people to read it. I don't want to be
right.
like, well, 400 people can read it because I wanted my like little small synchronized list of paid subscribers to read it. But
Yeah.
it's those are fun decisions to make, and for the most part, I'd say 95% of it is free, and even the ones I make paid, I'm later on like, I should have just made that free. I mean, what the heck? But it's just fun to write. I think, and I told my dad this last night. I said, awfully enough, it's sometimes more fun to write about a struggling team because there's more things to write about. The one thing about being a writer is that, and this is with music or articles or whatever, is that a little bit of pain doesn't hurt the writing, but you don't want too much of it. You know, like writing about a really good baseball team is just like, well, they're all hitting and pitching well. When they're not doing so well, you kind of get to like the coaches and the team itself, you get to pop the hood and figure out what they should do and if it's going to work. So having a lot of fun over at Substack.
Oh, good. And I know you're covering the movies. So
Oh
what's
yeah,
out there right now that you're fired up about?
I would tell anybody and everybody if they like a good history lesson with some action to go watch Guy Ritchie's new movie. It's The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. It has former Superman himself, Henry Cavill, and Jack Reacher, Alan Ritchson playing in the role. And the cool thing about this movie is that it is an declassified Winston Churchill mission that was just declassified in 2016. So hopefully we're going to see more of these World War II tales where they recruited these let's just say group of unsavory individuals, but who could get the job done, behind enemy lines. And this movie is about them taking out the German U-boats in that war. And it's just kind of a fun, rollicking, funny at times, but also like, this really happened. And it's based on a true story. And Rory Kinnear makes a really good Winston Churchill. I don't want to think he's going to give Gary Oldman a run for his money, but I didn't know that was Rory Kinnear
Well,
playing Winston Churchill and chewing up scenery. And he's like, well, if Hitler's not going to play by the rules, then neither are we. And he's just chomping on a cigar. And it's good. It's just the kind of movies where I think it's great for Cavill. I still thought that he was kind of hosed in the whole Superman thing.
yeah,
And the crazy thing that I will tell you about is that in this movie, they're reporting to Ian Fleming, who would go on to create James Bond.
yeah.
And for all the people that wanted Cavill to play James Bond, the character that he plays, that he's based on, is the inspiration Fleming had to create the character of James Bond. So I told people, in a way, Henry Cavill got to play the most raw
Hmm.
and interpretation of James Bond. He's just a good actor. I've always thought he's just a great movie star. He can be funny. He looks like he doesn't eat a bagel. He's just like in perfect shape. And of course, you get the TV star at the moment, Reacher Alan Ritchson, who's just exploding. He plays like the second in command of the group, and it just works. And for Dev Patel fans, there's Monkey Man, which I also thought was really, really good. It's the actor directing and starring in this movie where he goes on the path of revenge that is probably the least likely to succeed and the most painful. He takes a beating in the ring as he tries to search for the person who murdered his mother, and it's kind of an action flick in the most brutal form of the word, but it's very well done. And so I think that if you want something a little different, because I'll admit, Daniel, that there's not a, a ton that makes me want to go out to the theater. I argue, or I actually playfully kid my other critics. I'm just a part time critic because, well, part of the time it's not a good idea to go because it's just TV is really making a lot of strides to keep people home, and you have Amazon kicking out the Fallout series, which I've started and I'm enjoying, and then you have them with the boys coming back, and you have TV making kind of a big plunge to go, hey, you don't have to go out there for cinematic kind of television. You have it right here. And I think that movies like Guy Ritchie's movie about World War II and then Dev Patel's movie are the ones that kind of cut through and they're worth seeing. But I'll admit that there's not as many movies that I just want to rush out to see. My new grading scale is more like, should you see it right now or can you wait and see it or should you see it at all? And a lot of the
Yeah.
movies they kind of fall into that second tier where it's like I don't want to just dismiss it, but I don't want to run out like the for example, the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. They made I think Matt Reeves he made his trilogy of movies and now they're making another one and there's just something about it where I don't want to have to run out. I mean, how many of these movies do we need? So I, I really look for those movies where it's like this is a one and done. It's going to be fun, and I'm going to maybe learn something. I'm going to feel something, and then it's going to be done. I don't need more. And all the movies these days, they just want to build and build and build. But I don't know. We'll see. I hope 2024 offers more. I know one sequel origin tale that I'm looking forward to is The Quiet Place Day One. I think that just looks really good, and they got the director of a great Nicolas Cage movie called Pig. They gave this indie director kind of a big budget, and that looks interesting because I love those first two movies, and to go back to when that thing just started, and that could be very interesting.
I actually made it out to the theater this week for the first
Oh
time
yeah,
in
well,
quite
what'd you
some time.
see?
What do you think I saw? I saw Phantom Menace again. That's what I saw.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, just to get a chance to because I'm pretty limited in my entertainment wells, and there's not going to be a Star Wars movie out for a while. But
yeah,
to get a chance to go back and see a movie that on that big screen, right? There is something about going out and seeing even a
yeah,
movie that you're familiar with on a screen that even with the technology that we have these days, and people have the big screens at home and all that kind of stuff. There's still something about going out and seeing it, in a
yeah.
in a
Just to kind of
theater.
you kind of get out there and you're really forced to just focus. I mean, it's a dark theater. It's not like you're at home, and that's where
Right.
TV's always going to battle itself. Is that at home you have a lot more distractions than you have if you're in a dark theater, watching a movie. And I'll agree, Phantom Menace was a time where it was an event movie. Like there
Yeah.
wasn't
Oh yeah.
150 things coming out that month. It was fans waiting. I mean, I think we got a trailer for that movie like 8 to 10 months before it came out, and it was just
Hmm.
building and building. Remember when The Dark Knight came out, and for the first year before that, it was just building and building. And now you don't really have that anymore. There's so much between movies
Yeah.
on streaming and movies in the theaters that you just mentioning Phantom Menace makes me think, oh man, what a time where you would just go, man, okay, we're going to the theater to see that no matter what. That was
Yeah.
just there was no question. So good for you though,
Oh yeah.
man. I'm sure you were a kid again for a couple hours.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't technically a kid when I saw it the first time, so
Yeah, but we can be reduced to one though for a couple
that is
hours. We go, we're not
that is
adults
fair.
anymore. Give me that
That is fair.
popcorn.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it was fun. It was I get to take my son was not even born when that came out, obviously,
Isn't
and
that
so we
crazy?
got to go see that. I mean, he has seen and again, one of the great things about Disney is they put out the new films, and so he's been able to see Star Wars on the big screen. But to go see a movie like that
Yeah.
was a lot of fun for him. So it was good. Well, Dan, it's been a lot of fun talking with you tonight, and yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, man. Talking to you has been more fun than watching than these Cardinals, man. I think that's what we got to lean on in these times where there's not going to be playoff baseball unless they do something ridiculously dramatic. But I mean, I think the biggest thing I just like better baseball to watch. It doesn't have to be a 10 game winning streak and an 85 to 90 win season. I just want to see like if they do strip things down, maybe come back and just go, man, we're just going to run and we're going to play defense and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. Try to find a way back to more better looking baseball is what I would say.
Yeah, that would be helpful, but we'll have to wait and see it if it develops. But
Yeah.
until next time, I've got Alex Christopherly going to join us next week as we start to ramp up this very long, very qualified, very exciting list of guests, and we count the days back till Alan Medlock's in the co-host chair. He he may not be. He may be looking for a leave of absence with this team, but we're gonna get him back in here. So, but until then, for Dan, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Shooter from the belt to the plate. A swing and a miss, and that's a winner. That's a winner. A World Series winner for the Cardinals.